Hey everyone, Brian from All Day Ruckoff here, and today's podcast episode is with David Ray. In this episode, we talk about his first event, training for GORUCK events, the HTL that he completed, and what it's like to ruck and do events with Parkinson's disease. I had a great time talking with him. I think this is an awesome interview. It's really insightful, especially to me. My dad has Parkinson's, and I hope that you really enjoyed this interview with David. You're listening to the All Day Ruckoff podcast, episode number 160. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for downloading this episode. Truly appreciate it. And I really hope you enjoy this interview with David. Again, it was a ton of fun having him on. We're probably going to do another follow-up episode to further the conversation on this. And without any more intro, here's the interview with David. Today, I'm talking with David Ray. Really excited to have him on the podcast. We're going to be talking about how he got involved with Rucking, his first GORUCK event, kind of some of the events he's done since he started, and then the precursor to how we get into this is we're going to be talking about Parkinson's disease, which he has. And he's going to tell us his story there and kind of the unique challenges that come along with it, especially as it relates to Rucking and how Rucking has kind of, helped him out in all of this. So I'm not going to say too much here because it's David's story and I want him to tell it. David, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about all those things you mentioned.
Thanks again for taking the time. I'm really excited to have you on, and wanted to give some brief intro there, but again, didn't want to, tell your story for you. So
Sure.
Starting from the beginning, I guess, if you could tell us, for people who don't know what PD, Parkinson's disease is, and kind of how you got diagnosed with it. I think that's a start we want to go with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just as a overview of what Parkinson's is, it's a progressive nervous system disorder of the brain, and by and large, it affects all sorts of movement, whether that's autonomous or conscious movement, big or small. Small twitch muscles, fast twitch, slow twitch muscles, everywhere in between. It can affect any of those systems in any degree. It's an interesting disease because if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's because it affects people so differently. But at its core, for either genetic reasons or potentially exposure to some sort of toxic substances, or just really bad luck, there's neurons in the brain that are supposed to produce dopamine, which controls muscle movement, and they just stop doing that. And once they stop doing that, there's a whole host of Parkinsonism related diseases, but the granddaddy of them all is Parkinson's disease. And once you have it, you've actually probably already lost about 40 or 50% of your natural production of dopamine. It's also another interesting disease in that they can't really determine those numbers or quantify that unless you are deceased and they slice and dice your brain and do comparisons. So it's all sorts of fun. I was initially sort of told by a coworker of mine. So this was back in 2012. I had moved from northern Utah to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and settling in, and things were going hunky dory, and didn't really have any indicators that anything was wrong. But I was actually asking questions of a speaker at a conference, at a tech conference, and so at the end of the presentation, you can get up, step up to the mic, and sort of ask questions. And after I had done that, one of my coworkers asked me if I was using cue cards when I was asking these questions. I was like, well, no. Why do you say that? And she said, well, your arm was like locked in this position that made it look like you were reading from cue cards the whole time. And I sort of didn't think anything of it, but I thought it was odd. And so I went home, and my wife and I at the time used to go, for long walks in the park and what have you. And so I just said, hey, can you just sort of watch me functionally as we're walking and notice if anything's off? And sure enough, like within, the first 2 or 3 times we had done those walks, and she's, paying more attention to my gait and my posture and arm movements and things like that. She's like, hey, man, your right arm just does not swing autonomously at all. So it's kind of it's like an insipid thing because it just kind of sneaks in, and you may not notice it for a long time. Um, it might be so innocuous that you're not cognizant of it. So we went through a series of batteries of tests with my primary care physician. You got X-rays. Initially, I thought it might be a like byproduct of a Turkish get-up gone wrong. I used to do CrossFit quite often in Utah, and it was a great experience because I actually got to work out with the box owner during lunches because he needed a workout buddy. So I got like personalized training. But one day we're doing ridiculous Turkish get-ups with like 95-pound barbells, and I just went out of balance. And instead of doing the right thing and throwing it, I fell on my back and slammed my elbow into the ground and shear fractured my wrist. So kind of in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, this is right shoulder. Maybe I have some scar tissue that is just, it was latent and now it's presenting problems. But no, there's no indication of that on X-rays. I had like EMGs to make sure my, my electrical system was working inside. And then I had an MRI, and that was inconclusive. And then at that point, they're like, okay, you need to go see a neurologist. And you're like, oh crap. If it's not something that they can identify, they got to send you to one of the big guys. Then, at the time you're thinking like, all right, this is either ALS or, Parkinson's or something, who knows? So yeah, we went to, I had to go through a couple of neurologists to finally find one that I, liked. I was inadvertently sent to a sleep neurologist once. And so he was opposed to diagnosing me with early onset Parkinson's because he said I was too young. And I was like, dude, there's a reason it's called early onset Parkinson's, right? Like this is typically an old man's disease, but there's certainly a host of younger people that get it. So I found my way to a neurologist that, he worked at a movement disorder clinic, and within 2 or 3 minutes of him seeing me, he's like, yep, sorry, you got Parkinson's. So that's kind of how my journey to being diagnosed with it, at least.
So how old were you at the time, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. So this was in 2012. So I was 37. So not too young, but I mean, typical Parkinson's diagnoses are, late 50s on up, right? I mean,
Right.
there are some outliers, obviously. The classic example is Michael J. Fox. He was diagnosed in his early 20s, and yeah. So I mean, there are cases, obviously, of people younger than middle age that get it, and however you look at probability, I was either really lucky or unlucky to get it.
And I mean, I can only imagine a tough diagnosis to receive. How did you take it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I mean the initial reaction is just kind of internalize it, and in Western society, like men typically don't open up to many people. They just kind of put their blinders on and like go to work and get the job done and come home and provide and all that good stuff. So I think I fell into that trap, for a while. I was a consultant at the time, building awesome technology for people all over the world. So I just dug in, I dug in and didn't talk about it really to anybody. And part of that was because at the time it wasn't really, didn't really inhibit me to that great of a degree, because we caught the symptoms sort of early, and I was on low doses of dopamine, And I just kind of, went with it for a while. So in one sense, it was just sort of, okay, whatever, this is this thing, and it's not really problematic. So why spend a lot of mental energy on it? But at the same time, I know myself, I fell into some old habits. I started, doing some emotional eating, things like that, and got pretty out of shape, um, much to my chagrin. And then, like one meeting I had with my neurologist, he's like, "Listen, you can treat this diagnosis like an anchor, right? You can either just sort of be anchored to it, and you're going to be stagnant physically, and you're going to decline in health probably more rapidly than you otherwise would, or you can just kind of do your best to drag this anchor along, and see where you get." And I mean, in hindsight, I understand his perspective because I was out of shape. Maybe he didn't have a great outlook for me. Um, but I went home and thought about it, and I was like, I've been in shape before. I know how to do this. I know how to get back in shape. So I went home and thought, how am I going to pick this anchor up and like move it as fast as I can, as far as I can, as long as I can, right? Because I didn't want, my daughter at the time was 2, 3, and my son was, 8 or 9. I'm like thinking to myself, okay, geez, if I don't do anything, I might be alive, when they both graduate, but I might be at home because I'm not mobile, I can't control my movements. So sort of thinking into the future and where I might be if I didn't do anything was really the motivation, and that's stoked the fires to get into shape.
And that's so great that you're able to, you know, think about that and use that as motivation because I mean, for me personally, when I get stressed or when things happen, I go to eating too. That's a pretty easy
Yeah,
one right there
it's, it's a classic.
because it tastes delicious.
Yeah,
And and the problem with that, at least what I've you know learned from PD because my dad has it is that fitness is like it seems like the way to slow down the spread. And sometimes when you
yeah,
get news that you're not happy with or things that get you in that spot, it can be tough to work out. So it's like not only do you have to beat those feelings, but you have to beat them and push beyond it and start
yeah.
actively working out. That can be tough.
Yeah, it's actually like for PD specifically, it's like a compound problem too, because there's a lot of science, like gut biome science that they're looking into, saying, maybe some of this is caused by poor Western diet, and the gut biome's just messed up from all these, like aspartame and all this fake food, processed food. So, like, you're doing yourself a double disservice by A, not working out, but and also B, just putting crap into your body. Um, I've discovered over the course of these last 8 years that I am optimally running when I'm on a low inflammation diet. So whether that's paleo or keto variants or just low carb, um, that does it for me. And if I fall out of that, which obviously I did for a while, it makes it compounds the symptoms that I have, and which then compounds your lack of desire to work out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you're feeling bad on the inside, then, and you already have things stacked against you on the outside, it can make working out even more difficult. And
Definitely.
I'm glad that you brought up the diet because it's been interesting watching my dad because so my wife has celiacs, so she doesn't
Hmm.
eat wheat.
Right.
My dad's doctor was talking to him about, potentially going on a no wheat diet and no dairy and seeing how that, impacted him. So, we were able to share some recipes and
Yeah.
because that's how we eat because we don't cook 2 dinners. We just don't eat gluten. And it was interesting to see as he'd go back to his doctor, how things would kind of level off when he was, exercising over 150 minutes a week and had
Yeah.
completely changed up his diet.
Yeah, I mean, it's a marked improvement. And, it's again, one of those things when you're like in the thick of your internal struggle or whatever, you just don't, you forget that perspective. Like you forget how good you felt when you were doing the right things, doing the correct things for your body. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a precarious position. And that's why it's really helpful to have a great support group, whether that's your family, or family and friends, work colleagues, workout buddies. All those things are really, really important for these kind of long-term degenerative diseases.
Yeah, I can, only imagine how much more important a support structure like that is to have. And I up to you, but I think this would probably be a decent time to talk about, your support structure and the structure you found. It sounds like, our pre-talk to this, at some point you got involved with F3 and started working out with them.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So, sort of going back to what I was reflecting on earlier, how you just kind of put your blinders on and just go do the things you think you're supposed to do, not have time or opportunity to create healthy relationships, whether that's with your spouse or your kids or your neighbors. And so um, during the course of my getting diagnosed and things like that, one of the things that Parkinson's does is really mess with, well, at least for me, it really messes with your circadian rhythm. So I had an opportunity to go to Iceland with my work at the time, and we stayed there for about 10 days, and we came back, and I just could not get unjet lagged. Like I was waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and in parallel, my wife worked with a great guy at her job, and he was doing F3 in our neighborhood. He's like, "You got to get your husband out here. Like, he's up anyway. you know, we don't care. Nobody cares how out of shape you are. We want to, we want you to get out there, and we will. We're not going to leave you where you are. So don't feel like you need to get in shape before you come out and do F3, things like that. Um, and I'm sure some of your audience knows what F3 is, some doesn't. It's a male, organically grown, free fitness program for men that seeks to establish male leadership and healthy male bonding through fitness. And so there's 3 F's. The first F is fitness, the second is fellowship, and the third is faith. And that faith can be Judeo-Christian or any variant of anything. It could be just you believe in something greater than yourself. So I was all in for fitness. Like I was like, okay, let's do it. I gotta do something. So I went for like the first couple weeks, and like I said, I was up anyway, so that was no problem. But what was really important for me was to do some of this fellowship. Like, hey, I've heard you guys actually engage each other in conversation and learn about each other. Because I live in a high density community, and before I started doing F3, I considered myself to have maybe 2 or 3 what I called bus stop buddies. You see them at the bus stop, you say, hey, how's your kid? Mine's good. How's yours? How's work, et cetera, et cetera. See you later. And just no real meaningful relationships. So I was thinking, okay, F3 is going to help with my fitness, help with establishing a greater network of people that are close that I can count on. I was just like, I'm so gassed during these workouts that I'm not getting that fellowship right now. So I was talking to a couple of the guys, and they're like, hey, if you don't want to come out at 5:30 in the morning, you can come out at 4:30 in the morning, and you can ruck with us. I was like, okay, 4:30 is pretty early, even for me, pretty freaking early. And I was like, what? I don't even know what that is. What is rucking? And they were like, okay, well, you take a backpack and you put a bunch of weight in it and you just walk around. And I just thought, like, man, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I had no exposure to it. I wasn't in the military. I didn't have really any immediate family that was in the military. So I just didn't have any clue conceptually what it was. I was just thinking like back to college textbooks and things like that, and like how annoying those were. But I gave it a chance, and I went out and It's 4:30. There are about 5 or 6 guys, and I tell you, like, rucking is really awesome. And I find this still to be true today. Whether you are just starting or you've done thousands of miles, like, you put that ruck on and you feel great for about 45 minutes, and you can talk and laugh and have a grand old time. And then 45 minutes in, you're like, oh man, this is a workout. This is great. I mean, you still feel great, but you're working. You're getting some work done. So I thought it was the perfect combination of that fitness and fellowship that I was really wanting and needing and seeking out. So that was my first real foray into it, was through F3, which is I'm super thankful for. And then I just became like a rucking dynamo for a while.
It's
Yeah,
it's so great when you're able to kind of connect with the community. And I really like that your reference to bus stop buddies,
yeah,
because I feel like with COVID-19 now, a lot of people working from home or not, being able to work, you really find out who your bus stop buddies are and, who your actual community is. Because I used to work in downtown Seattle, and there were people I'd talk to, on the bus, or I'd see them in passing at work. And then, you talk almost daily, but then COVID hits and you haven't talked since then. You're like, huh, or,
yeah,
you really figure out, who's in your community.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a strange. Yeah, so yeah, on top of everything else, that's going on with Parkinson's and all that fun stuff. Yeah, to be living in this day and age is certainly unprecedented for a lot of reasons. But yeah, you make a great point in that it really does further define and refine who those super who those people are that are in your circle that you are going to be there for, and they're going to be there for you irrespective of what's going on.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you started working out with the F3 group, you were diagnosed in 2012. And then kind of
Yeah,
when did you start working out with F3? And, was that a pretty seamless transition back into fitness, or, and into rucking, or did you notice, some issues starting out with them?
sure, that's a great question. Yeah, so I was diagnosed in 2012, and I think it wasn't until 2014, like January of that year, that I went to Iceland. So between 2012 and 2014, I had some fits and spurts of trying to get fit again, whether that was through some paid boot camps in the neighborhood, or um, road biking or mountain biking, what have you. Just nothing too serious. Um, but yeah, so my weight got pegged again, and then that January of 2014 rolled around, and it was like, okay, let's go. And yeah, so the first F3 workout I went to, it's overwhelming. Like, to be honest, in a good way in hindsight. Like, you go there, you have no idea what to expect. Um, if you're like most people, you haven't sort of jumped around on different things out in the open, whether they're be cinder blocks in a construction zone, or uh, impromptu pull-up bars, things like that. But the most amazing thing to me was, I was gassed in the back, super slow, and these guys would keep coming back to me and be like, "Hey, you're doing great. Let's just keep at it." And we're our own worst enemy, and so you're just thinking to yourself, "No, this is I don't get this. This is not. I don't buy into this yet." But after the first 2 or 3 times, you're like, okay, these guys are serious. They mean what they say. Like, they're going to come back to the six, to the back of the line. They're going to support you. They're going to come back and find you, but they're certainly not going to leave you where they found you. They're going to make sure that through these principles of F3, over time, you're going to be in the middle of the pack, and you're going to start leading workouts yourself, and then you're going to be in the front of the pack, and then you're going to start going back and picking up the new guys in the back of the pack. And it's just this awesome, circular rhythm and organism that's going on. So while it was, for the first couple months difficult physically, it was seamless from the perspective of, hey, I found a place where these dudes are not hyper competitive. They're not gonna laugh at you for not being able to do legit pull-ups or things like that. They're gonna be there to support you. And if you tell them you've got some issues, they're gonna work with you to modify, and they want you to do the best that you can on that day.
And it's so great to meet groups like that. F3, local ruck clubs, all of the local ruck clubs that I've hung out with have been very similar. The F3 groups that I've worked out with have been exactly what you've said. And it's tough because like you were saying, a lot of people, myself included, when I wasn't in great shape, I'd say, well, I've got to, I can't go and work out with them until I can run a certain amount of distance, or, do a certain number of push-ups, or I can't work out at this ruck club until I can easily ruck, 12 miles in whatever amount of
Right.
time. We kind of put these self-imposed limitations on ourselves. And, half of it's probably because we don't want to embarrass ourselves when we show up and we're just sweating all over the place during a
Right.
ruck, or, the other side of it's kind of giving ourselves a little out.
Absolutely. Giving yourself an out is is certainly part of the equation. But yeah, just again, I think it's sort of problems that are endemic to our Western culture. Like, we fear and kind of reject failure, right? So we teach, in school, that if you fail tests, you are a failure, right? But I mean, look at science and scientists. They fail thousands of times, and then they, learn how to split the atom. Um, so I mean, from a physical analog, like, yeah, you're going to fail a whole bunch, but you can't be afraid to fail. You have to, you can't let fear paralyze you. You just have to go out and just do stuff. I mean, in hindsight, saying, "Oh man, I got to get in shape to get in shape," it's asinine.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I love that advice and just kind of that whole conversation, because, anyone who's listening who's in that spot, because I know I've been in that spot years ago, it's a tough spot to get out of. But, it's just, here's another conversation saying you got to get out of that spot and, reach out to your local club, your local workout group. It's worth it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Obviously, it's scary to put yourself out there. In general, I have found that if you put yourself out there, the rewards that you reap are much more than the energy it took to put yourself out there.
That is the perfect way to summarize that. You put yourself out there 4:30 in the morning. You start, rucking with these guys before the F3 workouts. At what point did you think, I guess I'm going to I might as well sign up for a GORUCK event? Did they talk you into that? Was that something you found on your own? How did that whole thing happen?
Oh, that probably so yeah, probably within. I think I started rucking in July of 2014, and then no, not 2014. My dates are off. I started rucking in July of whatever year it was, and a group, a subgroup of F3 were pretty dedicated ruckers, and I started like going to other F3 sites just to see, meet and greet new people. And this group latched onto me, and they're like, "Hey, you should come do this tough in Chapel Hill in October or whatever it was." And I naively was just like, "Sounds great, let's do it," not really knowing what I was getting myself into. Because basically the F3 marketing for GORUCK Tough is like, if you can run a 5K, or if you can get through a F3 CSOP, which a CSOP is um, an event that is completely stupid and utterly pointless. So it's usually like a 3 or 4 hour event where you just go from like workout to workout to workout, for no particular reason other than to work out a lot. But they were like, if you can do a CSOP or 5K, you should be able to get through it tough just fine. And I was working out pretty consistently for like 4 or 5 months, and loved putting in distance under the ruck. And I thought, sure, let's do it. So yeah, I signed up for Pathfinder Endure because a couple of my buddies were doing that to prep for this tough, and just did the work, and kind of just smiled and got miles in and did Ruck PT, and um, eventually found myself on at Stardex, ready to face the unknown.
So you signed up for Pathfinder Endure, so you had some idea of the kind of workouts that you'd be doing probably at the event. Did you have much other insight into what the event would be like besides that, or was it kind of a surprise?
It was a surprise. I understood sort of the framework that it was going to be 12-ish hours, and that there would be an active or retired special forces cadre telling us to do um, things of unknown weight and quantity and distances for the entire time. So I mean, that was those were my known knowns at that time, which were basically a lot of unknowns. um,
Right, that might just create more questions than you had to start with.
yeah, yeah, and it's great. It was fine because at the time, I trusted the guys that brought me in, and I respected them enough to think that they would not put me in a position or an event that um, either they or myself probably couldn't finish, if that makes sense.
Right, right. So you've got this group of people you've been working out with, and you trust them that they wouldn't suggest you should do something that you wouldn't be able to finish that would be dangerous
Yep,
for you.
that's exactly right.
Just another reason why it's so nice to have a community around you that you work out with, so they can help you out with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, I would have never, were it not for F3, I would have never been exposed to rucking, and I would have never found these GORUCK events. And who knows? Who knows where I would be right now, honestly.
So you finished that first event. When you're done, how did you feel? Were there low points during the event, high points? How did that?
Yeah, how did I feel? Total euphoria when you're finished. I had never ever done anything that challenging physically in terms of duration, distance, weight. Um, there were definitely some challenging points throughout that event. I remember pretty early on. I don't remember what the infraction was, but we were just cruising through the middle of Chapel Hill, and something happened, and it was Cadre Heath, and he was just like, "All right, mother freakers, we're gonna freaking punish you." And he just came across this. Uh, at the time, it probably looked like a, a 200 or 300 pound rock. Because again, this is my first event. It's like 10, 11 at night. Everything looks larger than it might really be. And he's like, "You guys got to move this until I tell you not to." And I was my battle buddy at the time was this just big ox of a dude, like 6'4", super lean, super muscular, and he'd take the weight, and I knew I was in trouble because after like 50 feet, he's like, "Oh, you got to take this." Um, so yeah, that was my first experience with like figuring out how to just get your mind right, and just embracing the suck, and moving that weight for as far as you could, for as long as you could, without necessarily complaining, knowing that there would be people to take the load when you couldn't do it anymore. So there's that challenge, and then the other one was just while I was getting in really good shape, I still had some sort of flexibility issues. And I don't know if you've ever done Jeeps and Tanks with Cadre Heath or one of the other Cadre, but it is a ridiculous movement involving basically duck walking and pretending you're a Jeep or a tank for a long time. And I just thought that was going to be the death of me. But because we all had to do it perfect for X amount of time, and I thought there was no way. But we made it through eventually.
Yeah, those movements feel like they can go on forever.
Oh yeah.
So you finished the event, felt great, very happy to have it done. Were your initial thoughts, I need to do another one of these, or were you thinking, that was something else, and we're, and we're gonna leave that
Right,
where
like
it is?
right, like, hey, I've put that feather in my cap. I'm done. Right.
Yep.
Um, No, so I finished and I thought, okay, that was awesome. What's next? And then some of my other buddies who did not do that event because they were training for a heavy in DC in the next 3 weeks were like, "Oh, you should come up to DC and do the heavy with us." And I was like, "No, no, it's too soon. It sounds uh, insane to a level that I think that I cannot join you on that journey yet." So I mean, I came away from it wanting to do more, toughs, definitely. But the thought of doing a heavy, 24-hour event was just, um, it was not even. Uh, I mean, that sparked the uh, the spark, but it wasn't even a conceptually, uh, valid thought before they had mentioned it. But my first reaction was absolutely not, no way. I need more time. I need more training. Um, I need to dig in and do some more work and soul searching.
And so, I mean, that event was 3 weeks later. Did you end up doing it, or did you spend more time training?
I held to my word and did not do it. I trained with them, just so I can understand, what the sort of different, taking it to the next level meant. Whether that was them just doing more longer distance stuff or doing overnight rucks or coupon rucks. I did pretty much immediately sign up for Pathfinder Advance after that because I did definitely have the bug, so I wanted to get some of those mileage under my belt. Do some of the heavier little mini challenges within that program, just so I could understand, if I was going to be able to, eventually do a complete heavy at some point in time.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to have those for a gut check, kind of to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're not as shocked when you show up to your first heavy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think the following spring, if I remember my timeline correctly, I had done 2 or 3 more toughs in between, but F3 had um, set up a custom mountain heavy in western North Carolina, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I thought, okay, I'm going to train for this event. It's going to be amazing. Um, they're going to get me through it if I have doubts and all that jazz. Um, but then I just fell into sort of another classic playbook, and that was overtrain. So I think it was like March of that spring. Like my left leg was just hurting like hell. I went to my orthopedist, who was fortunately an F3 guy. So he knew exactly what we were doing to ourselves. He was a rucker as well. And we took some x-rays, and he's like, yeah, I think you have a stress fracture on your femur. And like, oh, that's, I understand that's not very easy to do. And he's like, no, it's not. You need to lay off for like 8 weeks and not do this event. Um, so that was pretty discouraging. I was doing all this work. I felt great Parkinson's wise. Like my symptoms were not even, generally not even a consideration. So it's like going full throttle, and just had to lay myself up for like 8 weeks, which was super disappointing.
That is disappointing, and that's a tough blow to take. How did you handle it? Did you take all the time training off? Were you still doing some workouts they're able to get in? What your schedule kind of look like for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I Fortunately I did not fall back into my old ways of eating ice cream to heal my broken bones. Um, I just, I took probably 2 or 3 weeks off completely. Didn't do any running, no rucking, no weight on my uh, body. And then I just started going out to F3 workouts and just modifying super heavily, right? So whether it was uh, good to do at the time or not, like I just do, one-legged burpees. I obviously wouldn't run. I wouldn't load do any load bearing stuff. Um, but at that point in time, I was totally invested in the culture and the social dynamic. So I missed that. So I needed that, to sort of keep me mentally in a good place too. So I had to get out there and just do what I could, which again, in that environment is totally welcomed and encouraged.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things that you know, it's tough for me to take time off from injuries. I
Yep.
hate the not training, but I can only imagine that it'd be, because you've got more things running through your head. You obviously you have a stress fracture, you have to treat that, but you're probably also running through scenarios where you're still, the whole way to slow down PD is to exercise, heart rate. So you probably just have a lot more to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was on, in the back. It's always in the back of the mind. Like, you cannot fall off the wagon. You got to somehow maintain some um, momentum. Um, so, along with some modifications I made, we also have a Peloton spin bike, and there's some good clinical trials studies on like high intensity spinning in Parkinson's, that if it's very beneficial. So I did that. There's a couple other things that are good for it that I considered but just didn't have access to. Like there's a boxing program that's really good for Parkinson's. So just the main thing is you got to try and like mix things up, sort of confuse the mind into convincing it to act normally again.
I almost can't think of anything more confusing to the mind than Rucking and GORUCK events.
Yeah, that's a total understatement. Absolutely. Yeah. But there also is still a double-edged sword there because I mean I totally needed that platform to do that work and put myself in that mental and physical state. But on the other side of the coin, this is a brain disease, and the one time the brain heals itself is when you're asleep. So doing these 12-hour overnights, 24-hour overnights, eventually, HTL attempt, a couple HTL attempts and one HTL completion. It's like where, that's, you're also thinking like, what is too much? Am I going to get to a point in time where I'm actually negatively impacting my Parkinson's now? So yeah, there's always some weird calculus going on in my head as to how hard should I be working at this point in time based off these factors.
Yeah, that's got to be quite the equation because it's tough too because you've got this community that you've surrounded yourself with and you see them signing up for these bigger events. And I mean, I get drawn into that too, where I have no kind of plans on doing an event, and then all of a sudden you see your friends are signing up. You're like, oh well, maybe
Right,
maybe I,
right.
I will train up for that and sign up for that, and it's just got
Yeah,
to be.
it's definitely it's a difficult decision making process. But I mean, once I sort of validated my experiences with my neurologist, he's like, hey, there's not ever really been any long tail studies on this kind of work on you know this demographic of patients. So if you feel good, keep doing it. And that was pretty much all the validation that I needed to keep doing it.
I mean, that's some good validation right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'll tell you, when we initially talked, and he was mentioning to me about the anchor and all that jazz. He also told me at that same time, he's like, if you want to get into a workout program, like I really encourage you to only maybe work out 3 days a week, 20 or 30 minutes a time. And I was just thinking to myself, like, I've gone through this process before. I know what effort it takes to lose weight and stay in shape. And I was just thinking that's not going to do anything. So then to be able to come back like a year later, year and a half later, and he's just like, what have you been doing? And I basically said, I took your advice and just threw it away and just I've done as much as I could. And he's like, okay, well, if it's working, keep doing it.
That's awesome. I can only imagine that it would be, tough from his point of view as well, because if you tell someone to do too much, then,
Right.
they don't do anything. They start out, it's too much, they don't do anything. And if you tell people not to do enough, then there's no changes they see. And for people who are, I don't know if it's wired like us, but I mean, you kind of just, like you said, you step back, you looked at, you said 20 to 30 minutes, 3 times a week. Like that's, we're looking at maintaining status quo here. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a little bit of gains, but like nothing life changing.
Right.
And then to
Right.
use that and push yourself forward and make all that incredible progress. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's been definitely a journey, and it's I've had my ups and downs. I think like last November. Um, so I finally completed my HTL last September to New York 9/11 HTL, which was just an amazing experience. But as we rolled into late fall, like I just felt like crap. I was not sleeping. Um, my medicines didn't seem to be doing anything. So I'm just like, okay, this is progressive disease. Progressive disease. Like, what's the situation? Like, am I done rucking? I've always been pretty upfront with my buddies that were um, hardcore into it, and I just told them, I said, hey, I'm going to do this. Uh, within reason, as hard as I can, for as long as I can, until I can't do it. And there were a couple mornings where I'd get out and we'd be a mile or two into a 4 or 5 mile coupon ruck, and all of a sudden I become like the Tin Man, because Parkinson's. If you're a low dopamine, you just get rigidity in weird ways, in weird all over your body. And I just remember one morning I was like, dudes, I think I'm done. Like I cannot move. I literally just laid on the ground until my brain produced a little iota of dopamine, and I was able to get up and start working again. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a hard, it's always a hard balance, but like like I said, finally I had to get my diet right again this last spring, based off of the late fall being kind of a crapshoot. Um, and since probably mid February, I'm just like back at it, like it's no issues again, which is awesome.
I'm glad to hear that, but what a roller coaster. You're back in it now, but I mean that must have been pretty tough to have those thoughts.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, at the time, it was devastating, because I mean, my social circle is at 5 in the morning until 6:30 or 7, hanging out with these great people, whether it's the F3 group or the Ruck Club that we built in Durham, Hope Valley Ruck Club, um, training for crazy events. Yeah, I was just like, dude, I'm done. Like, this really is going to suck. um, but on that's like on a macro level. I go through it at some uh, micro level, pretty much every 4 hours, which is sounds terrible, and it is, but so dopamine cycles, for me, I take dopamine every 4 hours, and so um, it's like 20-minute onset, and then I feel amazing, which for most people means they feel normal again. They can freedom of movement. They're not having weird spastic movements. They're not rigid. They're not getting weird neurological cramps. Um, but when I'm getting into hour three-ish, is a wearing off period where you kind of start succumbing to some of those symptoms. Things start slowing down. Um, Sometimes my feet will cramp like a claw, like a bird gripping a branch. And other times they'll splay the other direction, and they're literally like neurological. You can't like roll them out or stretch them out. You just have to kind of grin and bear it and push through. Which it's difficult, but I just go back to, if I'm not willing to do that, what's what's the alternative?
You've surrounded yourself with this support network and you also have your family and your goals there.
Yeah,
That's got to be, so powerful.
I mean, I've learned so many lessons from rucking, from cadre delivering beatdowns that you don't think you can survive, from teammates, pulling you out of dark places, from myself being able to pull others out. Um, yeah, you have to find the motivation and willpower to get through it. Whether it's whether you're dealing with, I don't know, you lost your job, or you know family member died, or you're going through some stuff yourself, whether that's mental or physical or both or whatever. Um, that's what I just think was awesome about rucking and the GORUCK event framework is you truly challenge yourself and learn from yourself and others how to get past those things, and how to work through them.
Absolutely. And so, speaking of working through some challenges, you felt great when you finished your first tough event. How did you feel when you finished up that 9/11 HTL?
Oh man. Yeah, it was really surreal, just because of that particular event itself, and what it means, to the United States of America. Um, but also sort of because of my trajectory to get there. A few of my buddies went up the year before to attempt it, and we got through the heavy, and we all sort of silently walked back to the hotel, and we were just in the elevator, and I think we all just sort of looked at each other, and uh, whether or not it was ESP or whatever, we just all agreed that we were quitting. All of us thought if we go back out there, there's no way that we could do another push-up with good form. So why bother going? So I mean, we collectively agreed to quit, and we were all okay with that. And we didn't tuck our tails between our legs and went home, but we definitely went home unfulfilled in terms of meeting that goal. Um, so yeah, we spent the next year training. In the interim, we had a custom HTL in Chapel Hill, which I also unfortunately wasn't able to finish. I did the heavy, felt awesome, but then I sort of had this ideal transition in mind, and I thought, okay, I need to sleep for a few hours because brain needs to repair itself. And I could not sleep. I was having some weird neurological dysfunction, and I just told my buddies, I said, I can't do the tough. I can't do it. A, I don't know if I'll get through it. B, my 15-year-old son was going to come to the light, and I thought, I'd rather just bail on the tough and have a good experience seeing my son doing his first light and doing it with him. Um, but yeah, then fast forward to September of 2019, and we were all just had our game faces on and went back up there, and StartX was interesting because one of the GRTs did bring his headlamp, and so we just got eviscerated. Before the thing even started, just absolutely blown out with push-ups and stuff. And they were about 2 hours into it, and we got separated into different groups, and I was in Cadre Cleve's group, and I remembered the pain he delivered from the last year, and I just it didn't feel right at all. One thing you are keenly aware of with Parkinson's is where you're at in your dopamine cycle and where you think you should be based off of historical data. And I just I was not in a good place. And yeah, I pretty much, flagged them over and was like, I'm not in a good place. I think I'm going to quit. I'm the one that wrote you, told you I had Parkinson's. Because once I started exhibiting cramps or weird oddities like that in events, I usually reach out prior to the event just so they know what's going on, know what medications I have, how often I need to take them, things like that. And they've always been really accommodating. But yeah, he pulled me aside and he's like, listen, you spent all this time training, you spent all this money and resources getting up here, and I just really need you to think through this and tell me if you really want to quit. I'm fine with that, but you gotta do what's best for you. But it was really awesome because that was when he relayed to me that his dad has PD, and so he understood where I was coming from. But he didn't want me to make a snap decision. So yeah, he gave me 3 or 4 minutes, and my buddies came over and were just what's going on? If you're done, we'll be done too. But we'll also rally around you. What do you want to do? And so, fortunately, I just decided to, put one foot in front of the other and do the work. And some number of hours later, we were finished on Sunday, and it was incredible. like just as poignant as the tough index was, this was exponentially more important.
And so this was your third HTL attempt?
Yeah, that's correct.
So that middle one, I mean, that's kind of a special case, right? Because you wanted to come back for the light with your son and kind of
Hmm.
be there, be really in the moment and spend that with him.
Yep.
So kind of disregarding that one, the first event, you finished the heavy and you all, everyone who came together had these feelings in the elevator. You're like, we are, this isn't how we thought we were going to feel at the end of the event. This isn't kind of how we anticipated it would be going from the heavy to the tough. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you had those same feelings, in your third attempt when you finished it. When you finished that heavy, did you feel right as rain? Like this is the exact transition I was hoping for. This is everything's going according to plan. Or did you have similar feelings that, I can't do a push up. This is tough, but I'm gonna stick it out.
Those great questions. Yeah. So um, the main difference in terms of approach with the second time we went up was that, at least for me, was I, instead of considering it, three separate events with some breaks in between, I just implanted in my mind the notion that this was an event that was going to start at 6 p.m. on Friday and would end sometime on Sunday. And just setting that as the framework made it so that the transitions were not an opportunity to reflect on where you were at and talk yourself out of going back out. And I don't think that we um, like openly spoke about that, but I'm pretty sure we all felt that way. So from that perspective, like the with the exception of that moment in the heavy, like my mind was right, and so I knew about probably the morning following the start of the heavy. I knew that I would get through it. Now, how did I feel? When we started the tough, we had another just heinous PT beat down, because they bring in a bunch of fresh bodies that need to be sort of acclimated to where the people that were doing the heavy were at. And I mean, I could not, we're doing like man makers and bodybuilders and thrusters, and I could not. I mean, I was not moving well. Number one, I mean, just because it's exhausting, but also, wherever I was at in the dopamine cycle. And at one point, Cadre Diaz, he and I had a great conversations from the custom HCL in Chapel Hill, and he was a cadre up there as well. And so, he would come over and needle me a lot. And eventually he just came over and he says, it's like, David, you have got to try and lift that over your head. Like, I cannot let you not do the work. And I was like, okay. And, I was just totally taxed, but attempted to do the work. And for better or worse, he came back like 5 minutes later, and there's this diminutive powerhouse in front of me. It's like, I don't know if she was even 5 feet tall, but Kadri was like, "Hey, give me your ruck." He took my ruck, and he said to her, "Hey, give me your ruck." And he took her ruck, and he swapped rucks. And any other time, I probably would have felt pretty not not really upset with myself, but not shame, but like, hey, give me let me do the work. But at that time, I was just like, dude, if he had not done that, it could have gone really south really fast. But just the cadre being able to recognize like where you're at as an individual and whether or not you're putting forth maximal effort for you at that point in time, and how they may or may not be able to accommodate certain things, was really awesome to see that. Like, I saw that many times for me over that weekend, which was great. It just proved to me even more that like these guys can connect with anybody in the crew at whatever they're going through, and figure out how to help them help themselves, or get through what they're going through.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit, before we started recording, is that it's crazy how they're able to get kind of maximum output from everyone who's taken part in the event, because you hit those moments, even towards the end of the event, and everyone's gassed. The person who, like you said, put in 20+ hour training weeks, they're gassed. The people who have put in 10-hour, 5-hour training weeks, everyone is taxed.
Yep, and that was the key difference, right? But the first, when we got done with that first heavy in New York, I think we all thought, hey, we're going to go out there and they're going to ask us to do this stuff, and we're not going to be able to do a perfect push-up, so we might as well quit. And we did. But going through more events during the next year and seeing these learning experiences and opportunities just makes you realize, they're not there to kill you. They're not there to see you fail. They're there to, like you said, like we said before, they're there to get you to achieve your best at that moment in time, which I think is really, really awesome.
Yeah, I can't agree more. They're not there looking for the perfect push up. They're there
Mm-hmm.
looking for the people who are giving it their all. And whether that's, less than perfect push ups, or push ups where sometimes, the knees are down a little and then they come back
Mm-hmm.
up, you see it at events, and they can tell, who is giving it their all and who is trying to skirt by. And
Right.
they put an end to that real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. They have eyes everywhere.
That they do. So I'm curious if we can, kind of bring this back full circle, for people who are
Mhm.
listening, I'm guessing a low percentage of them have PD, but they might know someone who does,
Right.
is suggesting, getting out there and rocking with them. Is that a good idea? What's a way that, people can kind of lend support and assist and help?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that, just if it's not rucking, just maybe go for a walk or go for a bike ride. A lot of it's going to be, we mentioned early on how this is a very individualized disease. Uh, so, for certain people, it may not be possible to ruck. For instance, like if their balance is severely diminished. But I think the important takeaway is like, um, if you have these people in your lives, figure out how you can meet them where, in some manner that they are comfortable with, or even maybe slightly uncomfortable, and meet them there and get them out, whether or not it's buy some sparring gloves and box with them, or, get on a go to a spin class with them, or ballroom dancing is another one that's really good for Parkinson's. Um, but if it's rucking, yeah, yeah, I would definitely encourage them to give that a try. Because for me, it's like, um, I won't say it's life saving, but then again, it might be, because again, I don't know where I'd be right now if I didn't have all these years of rucking under my belt. I might be not bedridden, but unable to do certain tasks, or what have you. I'd rather, you know, push the limits with what I can do out there rucking than explore the other side of that equation.
It's a good way of looking at it. And, it's so true. You don't know, where you would be at if you hadn't done all this, if you hadn't started, working out with your group, getting back in shape. But what you can do is look at the studies and all of the other cases out there, and kind of say, well, I, you probably wouldn't be down a better route. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and it's, ballroom dancing. That's one of the things that my dad actually took up. They started doing that when,
nice,
when my
nice.
yeah when my sister got married last September. They started doing dancing for that, and then they kept doing it. And it was one of those things that he had read, because it's cycling, dancing, swimming. He's like, oh, I'd never do dancing, but then he started doing dancing classes for that, and he actually enjoyed it. And
Yeah,
it's funny because it's, in some respects, just getting out of your comfort zone. I,
yep,
started doing GORUCK events to get out of my comfort zone. And then at some point, the events become part of your comfort zone. And it's just kind of looking for more ways to expose yourself to new stuff and kind of push the
Yeah,
limits.
absolutely.
So, for ruckers out there who feel super comfortable rucking, maybe ballroom dancing.
That's right. I expect that to be an evolution at some GORUCK event in the future.
There have been dance-offs at GORUCK events.
Awesome. Totally awesome.
And they're, not always met with the warmest reception, but it's kind of the lesson there is just being able to shed kind of the whole embarrassing feeling behind it and doing something crazy for your team, because that's the event that it happened. I wasn't at, but I had friends who were there. They were saying that they split the groups in half, the team in half, dance
Mhm.
off one team versus the other, and the losing team had to do just a epic amount of PT. So,
Yeah,
get out of your comfort zone, do something that you feel weird doing, and save your team.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
We've used up all the time I scheduled, but is there something that we might have missed? Is there anything that you want to talk about? Any final words you want to give on the podcast, or reiterate something that's important to you before we get going?
While we've talked about specifically, Parkinson's and rucking and my experience with it, I just think, at a higher level, I think I mentioned this in the blog interview. For me, most one of the most compelling reasons to keep doing these events is, not only to test my limits and where I'm at, but just to learn about other people, right? I mean, our society's like so uh, black and white, your team versus my team, whatever you want to call it, Democrat versus Republican, et cetera, et cetera. We just have to find ways to, like cross those lines and learn how to work together to, do meaningful stuff. We do it at this micro level within these events. I'm certain there's, all things being equal, if we sat down and just met in a building, not under those circumstances, we'd probably figure out ways to divide ourselves, into schisms or factions and not interoperate. But under the paradigm of the, GORUCK event, like you go there, you learn about each other, you do the work. I just think it's, especially where we're at in this day and age, like it's super important to figure out how to relate to another person and figure out what they're going through, how you can help them, where you guys agree on things, where you differ on things, and like just figure out how to do something actionable and meaningful.
Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for downloading this episode. Truly appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want links to anything we talked about during the episode, you can hit up the show notes, alldayruckoff.com/160, since this was the 160th episode. David, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on. I had a ton of fun chatting with you, and it was just some amazing information. Thanks again. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to help support the All Day Ruckoff podcast, you can head on over to either Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the podcast, leave a review. Those are truly appreciated. You can also hit up the online store, alldayruckoff.com/store, or support through Patreon, patreon.com/alldayruckoff. And there's a couple additional benefits for supporting that way, including some bonus items if you ever do make a order in the store. Hope you're staying safe out there. Hope everything's going well for you. Hope you're able to get your rucks in, your training in. And I can't wait to talk to you again next time. I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Christopher for supporting through Patreon. It's truly appreciated. Love the support, and I just want you to know that. Thank you so much. And thank you again for downloading this episode. Truly appreciate that. And as always, don't forget, attitude is everything. Keep yours positive. And thank you again for tuning in.